May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be aligned with your love, O God, our strength, our courage, our freedom, and our unity. Amen. Because I won't be here for the announcements part of our liturgy, I have to scoot away and preach at 12:15 at the mosque on Vermont after this sermon. I want to say how grateful I am that my friend and teacher, Kim Rosen, has been with us this weekend and was here to read what for me is a central poem in my collection of poems. I meditate on that poem every Lent and Easter. It so deeply explains the great mystery of life to me. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful to Kim. I've been hearing my mother's voice in me as I've been composing and writing this sermon and preaching it. My mother, God bless her, when she died, she was still a good Southern Baptist church lady in South Georgia. I'm sure she has broader horizons now. That's what heaven does to you. But when she would talk about me, I'm one of two of her children. She said, Edwin, bless his heart, he's my boy who went out and lived and ministered as a missionary in the land of fruits and nuts. So here's a report from the land of fruits and nuts. About 6 months ago, I noticed that when I would get home in the dark after a long day of work, and I would get out of my car and close the door of my car, that I heard this owl. Ooh, 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 ooh. And after a while, I began to sing back to the owl. Ooh, 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 ooh. And we would go back and forth. And in my egocentric moments, I would know that the owl was, of course, singing to me and responding to my singing. And then in that same front yard, there's my favorite palm tree in all the world. It's more than 50 feet tall, and its palm fronds are way up in the sky, and in just the right breezes, it has the greatest percussion in God's symphony. Now, one night this past week, I had to go back out to my car to get some reading material that I wanted to read as I was falling asleep, and I heard the owl. And then I heard the palm tree, and then I looked up and connected with the moon and the North Star. And all of a sudden, all of us were one. Today's gospel lesson is taken from John's gospel. The writer of the Gospel of John loves to talk about oneness. Oneness experiences. It's one of John's favorite words, one. The voice attributed to Jesus in John's Gospel is actually the voice of Christ, both the risen Christ, with whom the Church of St. John had many resurrection appearances and experiences, who is also the same Christ who existed from the moment of the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago. This is the Christ who is the Word of God described in the first chapter of John, who was present at the genesis of all created things. The Word of God, Richard Rohr says, can be translated the blueprint of God. the original program for how the world works, which became flesh in Jesus and walked with us, is the same Christ, the same energy who is in you and me and who lives within us as the light that enlightens everything there ever was created. That's the Christ. So in the fourth gospel, the one we call John's gospel, in some of the most dramatic moments, Jesus, the embodiment of that Christ, prays to God that humanity will discover their oneness as the same oneness that Christ and God share. Jesus prays, may they be one as you and I are one. Now, because I have come to see that our oneness with one another and with God and with all that has been created is absolutely central to understanding what Jesus is all about, and what I think healthy Christianity is all about, and what being a healthy human being is all about, and what healthy religion is all about. I want to share from my heart with you today about what I believe about oneness. Now, parenthetically, I want to say that I've long observed a lot of retirement preaching. And by that I mean listening to priests and pastors who have had long careers like I have. My first ordination was in 1971, long before some of you were born, when I was a mere 23 years old, 45 years ago now. And one strong theme in all this retirement preaching is the following statement. These people get in the pulpit and say, now that I'm retiring after so many years of preaching and being a priest or a pastor, I can say that I believe fewer things than when I was ordained. Some of you aging people are nodding your heads. But those few things I believe more deeply and passionately than ever before. To live is to jettison superficial beliefs and go for the depths. In these last 3 Sunday sermons I have left, I'm preaching on 3 things I believe more deeply than ever before. Today I preach on oneness. Next Sunday I preach on inclusion. And on May 1 I will preach about a new topic, love. Yeah. I'm so inspired by Brother Kobe Bryant this past week when he retired. His aging knees have been in oneness with my aging knees. And he scored 60 points in the last game. I'm going to try to score as many points as I can these last days. So let's score. So let me say 4 things about oneness. First, we are all in one family. Because of Dr. Martin Luther King's frequently saying in his sermons that if you and I don't learn to live together as brothers and sisters, we will perish together as fools, I came to understand that you and I are called to turn the human race into the human family. He said on that last Sunday sermon that he ever preached before his assassination, he was preaching in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., and he said, through our scientific and technological genius, we have made of this world a neighborhood, and yet we have not had the ethical commitment to make of it a brotherhood. He would say a brotherhood and a sisterhood now. But somehow and in some way we've got to do this. We are tied together in the single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, and whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the way God's universe is made. This is the way it is structured. A testimony to oneness. I, while being with you, have come to understand that arguably the most central place where human beings miss the mark about what life is all about. Missing the mark is the translation of the word sin. The central place where we miss the mark about what human life is all about is the myth of the separate self, the delusion that you and I are actually separated. To be sure, we are all different and unique, and yet we are connected and linked, but it is a lie to believe that we are separate, that I can do something to you that is harmful, and that it won't be of harm to me as well. Be that bigotry and prejudice, or advocating that you cannot have an increased minimum wage, or that you as a transgender human being don't have the same rights as cisgender human beings and can't go to the bathroom that you know you're supposed to go to. Listen up, North Carolina, Mississippi, and Tennessee. Because we're all in the same family. All the world's problems are because we have forgotten that we belong to one another, as Mother Teresa said. The problem that we've got, according to Father Greg Boyle, is forgotten kinship. And as Pope Francis said when he went to minister to the refugees from Syria 2 days ago on the Greek island of Lesbos, we are all one family. So as a result of this business of our being in one family, several years ago, I started a certain spiritual practice when I was driving around Los Angeles and Pasadena. When I see a person on the street who is talking to herself or himself, who appears poor and homeless and dirty, who would otherwise seem mentally unstable, I've been saying to myself, that is my sister. That is my brother. And I think that spiritual practice has changed my brain. Neuroscientists have found that our brains have a negativity bias. Our brains are actually wired to assign more weight to a negative event than to a positive event. You can get 5 compliments in one day and 1 criticism. And what keeps you up at night? The 1 criticism. Y'all have read about people like this. Psychologist Rick Hansen puts it succinctly this way: the mind is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive experiences. Now, we evolved to that, and we need to evolve beyond that in order to be one. So what we can do, Hansen says, is to take advantage of our brain's plasticity, the ability for it to change. We can change our brains. Something as simple as an activity that helps increase your awareness of your own body, such as yoga, meditation practice, playing golf, dancing, can change your brain. Neuroscientists have found that these activities thicken the insula, a part of our brain that helps increase our awareness of self and our empathy for others. And Hansen suggests that we make a conscious effort to soak in the positive experiences we encounter, just to stop and meditate on all of our positive experiences for at least 15 seconds. Identify the positive and allow yourself to take it in and reflect on it later, maybe in the practice of a gratitude journal, for example. Then we can change our brains to become more oneness oriented. Number 3. We've talked a lot here about new narratives. That comes from an understanding that when you are a child, if you don't have consistent, caregiving from your primary caregiver, that it can result in an insecure base of love instead of going into life with a secure base of love. You have an insecure narrative in the deep parts of your being, and you can heal that by developing a secure, a coherent narrative and developing a secure base of love. Now, that's an uphill battle for us in this culture, because particularly since the current presidential election campaign, we have been exposed to the strict father authoritarian narrative, which is all about being insecure if you're down low on the totem pole. Because you've got God above people, and men above women, and Christians above non-Christians, and white people above people of color, and on and on and on and on. People who are straight over people who are gay, on and on and on. And when you're at the bottom, then your culture is saying you have an insecure base of love. But you can replace that, the individualism on which that strict father authoritarian narrative depends. You can replace that individualism with what Dan Siegel, our neuroscientist psychiatrist friend, calls the moi brain, as opposed to the me brain. Dan Siegel had to invent this word because, you see, the English language is built in great part on the myth of the separate self. So you have to actually change the language to get to oneness. Now, just a heads up. There's going to be a roast of me this coming Friday night. And y'all are going to gather in this church and have a lot of fun at my expense. I don't know the script, but I have a sense that there's going to be some fun made of my propensity to make up words. And I just want to do a little proactive defense of myself. The only reason I invent words is because the English language is insufficient to communicate the really great news I've got to share with the world. I mean, there was a time where we didn't have the word quark. Dan Siegel has introduced the word moi. Simone Weil, who was writing during World War II, wrote, "Whoever says I," the letter I, the pronoun I, lies. There is no such thing as the autonomous individualist person. Aren't some of the best ideas you've ever had, they came as a result of a conversation with another person? We thought up that idea, not I. Elia Delio says that we have an opportunity as a result of religion taking on the cosmology of science to have a new, what she calls, universe story. And it all comes down to the fact that we're all made of one substance. Richard Rohr says, your deepest you includes me, we. Delio says, every human person desires to love and to be loved, to belong to another, because we all come from one another. We are all born from nature and are part of nature. We cannot know what this means, however, without seeing ourselves within the story of the Big Bang universe. Human life, our current human life, all of our current human life can be traced back 13.7 billion years ago to the time when all of life was one speck, one piece of matter, and then there was the Big Bang. That was the moment of what Delio calls capital letter singularity, whereby the intensity of mass energy exploded into consciousness. So all of us really are literally brothers and sisters to the owl, the palm tree, the moon, and the stars, because we're all sharing atoms and subatomic particles that just a few hours ago were in one another. You and I have subatomic particles in us that were in Moses, Muhammad, Jesus. So St. Francis was right when he talked about brother sun and sister moon. They literally are our subatomic siblings. Deep in our DNA, we belong to the stars, the trees, the galaxies. Delio says we are entwined with all life forms on our planet. And here is your Earth Day sermon in a sentence. Our fortunes rise and fall with them, all the life forms on the planet. Lastly, we are already one. We have to choose to claim it. One of Thomas Merton's last speeches, my North Star, just 1 month before he died, was in Calcutta. He was speaking to monastics from every religion, October 23, 1968, before his life was cut short at age 53 by tripping on a standing electric fan that shorted out on his body. And he said this in a speech. At the deepest level of communication is something deeper than communication. It is called communion. It is wordless. It is deeper than words. It is deeper than speech. It is deeper than concept. Not that we discover a new unity, we discover an older unity. My dear brothers and sisters, we are already one, but we imagine that we are not. And what we have to recover is our original unity. What we have to be is what we are. He too, in 1968, said we have to have a new language of prayer. He says it has to come out of something which transcends all our traditions and comes out of the immediacy of love. We have to access what is deep, because that is the real. The things on the surface are nothing. And then he said, I'm going to be silent a minute, and then I will say something. And he offered this prayer, "Oh God, we are one with you. You have made us one with you. You have taught us that if we are open to one another, you dwell in us. Help us to preserve this openness and to fight for it with all our hearts. Help us, God, to realize that there can be no understanding where there is mutual rejection. Oh God, in accepting one another wholeheartedly, fully, completely, we accept you. We thank you, we adore you, we love you with our whole being, because our being is your being. Our spirit is rooted in your spirit. And if we can embody this, then we can heal the world. Love has overcome, love is victorious. Amen. My friends, we are already one. But we must choose to become aware of our oneness. We must literally change our brains. We have a responsibility to change our brains, to keep them evolving. To change our brains from their being more consumed by the Velcro of negativity than the Teflon of positive oneness. We have to do that through mindfulness, through meditation, and what we focus on. St. Paul said in the 4th chapter of Philippians, and those of you who are Baptists can say this along with me because it was a Bible verse. Finally, brothers and sisters, Paul said, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, then think on these things. St. Paul was saying that before the neuroscientists knew about the Velcro of negativity. If you think on these things, you can change your brain. I really, 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 really believe what I've just preached to you about oneness. That is the resurrection. That is the sheer inevitability of wings.